A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away. Greetings and welcome to May the Panel Be With You, the Star Wars comic book show brought to you by Punch Up Entertainment. I am your humble host, Mike Gargoni, and joining me, as always, the Ponda Baba to my Dr. Evazan? It's John Campbell. Wait a minute, hold on.
I feel like we're repeating ourselves.
John, have we been here before? What's happening?
I think I've seen this podcast before.
But it's kind of like new and glossy, and there might be some added scenes to it. I think there's some updated CGI.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I hear I'm going to shoot at you first before you shoot me this time.
Oh, maybe you should have done the intro then, and I could just duck out of the way in a weird CGI head motion.
No human being can replicate that. Yes, folks, it's special edition time.
Yes, indeed. Before we got too far afield in terms of our adaptations of Star Wars comics, we have been covering the old Marvel 1977 comics up to this point. We thought we'd jump 20 years into the future to the 1997 edition of the Star Wars A New Hope adaptation. That is right, we're covering the special editions in comic book form.
This is a real level of nostalgia for me. Not that I love the special editions, because like all Star Wars fans, I have a love-hate relationship with them, right? Mm-hmm. But, boy, this was, before they were making the prequels and stuff, this was the new kind of Star Wars thing, right? I'm sure you also went and saw these all in the theater when they came out, right?
100%. Saw them all in the theater. I replaced my VHS box set with that gold one with the Vader on the side. Absolutely.
I think Star Wars must be the thing I've owned the most copies of across it has to be, right?
Because I cannot make that claim, but yes.
It's up there for me. I have a couple other ones, but for sure I've had because my dad had the original VHS of the Star Wars movies from when they were released by CBS Fox, which is crazy to think there was a time when that was one conglomerate. Then the black cased ones, with the trilogy, then the gold, then the widescreen VHSs, then the DVDs, then the special edition DVDs, then the Blu-rays, and now the 4Ks.
Mm-hmm. And progressively larger and larger box sets as more and more movies have been released, because obviously there was the original trilogy box set, and then they came out with the prequel edition box set as the companion piece once all of those had come out in the late 2000s.
This is how much Star Wars will gouge you for this stuff. I had the collector's box of just Phantom Menace when it came out. Do you remember this? It was a single VHS of Phantom Menace, but it came with artwork and a film cell, and I ate that shit up as a kid, man. I'm like, it's not enough 100%. To have the movie. I need all the stuff.
Oh, I mean, look, that's the glory of market synergy that is Star Wars, right? Is just the amount of stuff that came along with it.
Yeah, that is very much the thing. There is a collect. So here's another thing too that's fascinating to me. Did you have these comics, by the way?
I did not, because my mindset was always, I own the movies. Why would I need the comic adaptation?
Okay, yeah. This leads me to this thing. I think I might have had the Empire one, just the collection of it, because I think somebody gave it to me. It was one of those things where I'm sure you were this too, where it's just like, boy likes Star Wars. Come Christmas or birthday, anything Star Wars, get him. Mm-hmm. But all my relatives were from the Deep South, of course. No, I don't know. But that's right.
It speaks to my own personal fandom that everyone's thought about that in my family was dinosaurs or Godzilla. So.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, then you would add the either Star franchise for me was the thing.
Yes.
It was some kind of space thing. Or then you got my father or my grandfather going to the dime store and that's where you'd get space action.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, look, off-brand stuff.
There's a reason I found out about Gorgo and Gamera and all the other Godzilla knockoffs as well.
Sure. Yeah, there was that sort of thing where it's the relative was like, I don't quite know what this is, so I don't know. You said he liked a space thing, or just comics. The thing about this though that gets me, I agree. What is the point? And to this day, they still do these comic adaptations of every Star Wars movie and other movies as well, but particularly the Star Wars movies without fail. What is the point of these? Because I understand back like in 77 when we did those, you couldn't go rewatch the movie. Right. So you needed a way to relive it. And I get that. But by this point, why are we doing this?
We are doing this for a couple of reasons. One, because at this point, and despite the fact that the version we're going to be showing off today, the digital version that is available on Marvel Unlimited, has the big Marvel logo on the top left corner.
Yes,
that
very much not replacing a former Dark Horse logo.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at, is Dark Horse firmly had the Star Wars license as of 1997, and they were looking to make it, I mean, say what you will about Dark Horse as a business, but one of their cornerstones in the late 90s and early 2000s was adaptations of other popular franchises. Star Wars, Aliens, Predator, Terminator, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean,
it was kind of what most of what I bought of Dark Horse comics as a kid were, yes, things that tied into movies or TV shows I liked.
It was that and then Hellboy.
And then Hellboy. Yeah, exactly. Now they're really, I mean, some of it is they've lost some of these licenses without their own control, but I do feel like they've really tried to rebrand themselves as a creator-owned image type company now.
And they've done that to greater and lesser extents. You've got your Black Hammers and stuff like that.
No, they have some great stuff, but then they also have stuff where you go, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So at this time, when it came to their Star Wars comics, a lot of them are hit and miss. Like, there's a wide variance of quality when it comes to that. So if you're a Star Wars fan in the late 90s, and we've talked about this a little bit on this show, but also on our previous shows, that especially in the late 90s, before the prequels really got going, any Star Wars was the Star Wars you had.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I had so many Dark Horse comics, I'm sure you did as well, of Star Wars, because it was the next morsel of story of this universe I love.
So when it comes to adaptations in a comic book form, especially for collectors, I feel like having an adaptation of A New Hope that feels a little bit more in line with the movies that are being released, there's some appeal to that. And there is an appeal to being able to consume something in a bite-sized portion that doesn't take you an hour and 52 minutes.
Sure.
So I mean, I get it to a certain extent, but also at the same time, and we'll talk about this going into this book, there are some like weird omissions and weird abridging, I think is the best way to put it. This is an abridged version of the Star Wars episode 4.
In some places I found severely abridged. But yet also, yes, abridged is right, because the big thing that I think when we actually open this book up, compared to the weird oddities of the 70s stuff, there's also just some slavish, like, well, these are just lines from the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And I ended up not even consciously skimming this issue more than anything, because I was just going, looking for the deviations from the movie I know. And so, yeah, the things that stood out are like, where's this? Why is that? Why are they showing that? You know, more so than it's just like, well, that is what Darth Vader says.
And I just mentioned the whole collector aspect of it, but let's get into this cover, because that's going to be a big part of the whole collector aspect right off the bat. So you see this cover that we have here is Star Wars, A New Hope, Legends. I should actually go over the creative team here. We are covering the Star Wars: A New Hope - Special Edition 1997 #1. Our creative team here is, we've got Bruce Jones writing, scripting. Obviously, he's basing this whole thing off of Star Wars. We've got at least one legend here, Eduardo Barreto, on art.
I was going to say, and I would say that across the board is the standout to this to me. Just especially when you're doing the comparison. But yeah.
We've got Al Williamson doing additional inks. We've got James Sinclair on colors and Steve DeTuro on letters. And actually, I'm going to have some beef with the letterer throughout this book. But
this I can't wait to see.
But right off the bat, we have this cover. And
This cover is gorgeous.
this cover is gorgeous, but what you should take note of is in the bottom right corner, we have a quarter dome of the Death Star.
Hello.
And one of the big selling points of this particular book as it was being released was that the 4 covers for the 4 different issues could be combined into one large mosaic art piece.
Dude, that is 90s comics to a T.
100%.
That was the whole thing, man. We this is the era we became fans in, right? The lenticular covers, the 3D covers, the connecting covers. Oh man, it was all about the collecting of it, which is still the case now, but that's more niche. I feel like now it has switched more to, especially with digital and trades being so popular. It really is like, don't you just want to read these stories? But we grew up in the era when it was like, no, it's not enough. You got to display these suckers.
Right. So I promise you there is somebody out there who at one point, if not still today, has the 4 covers of these books framed together in some kind of matte background so that they are combined with the Death Star at the centerpiece.
And I feel like had we been a little bit older, we might be that person.
I've never been huge on the whole collecting aspects of comics. Like, even if you look at, like, my rarer books, they're all dog-eared and red, and the spines are broken because I read my books.
Yeah, we are comics fans for the stories contained within comics, less so than the, like, I've never had that as well. That's why I've never gotten into the variants. I've never been, why would I pay more for a copy of something that has a different cover? I have some framed comics on my wall, but only because they're signed by people, not because there's anything about the comics.
Well, and like certain comics I've maybe collected multiple versions of because it means something to me.
Yeah, and I think that's more, look, if you're into the collecting of comics, we're not here to harp on you. That's your thing.
No.
IEC, the toy displays behind me. I understand the concept of collecting.
And I've got a shelf of D&D books, half of which I've never used. So, like, I collect other things, don't get me wrong.
We understand the collector mindset. My God, I just was reorganized.
Comics was never my thing, yeah.
No, that's it exactly, yeah. So, but yes, immediately I will say, whoa, it's like, look at just how much more import is put on this cover than what we've seen over at Marvel in 77. Like, this is firmly like, oh, Star Wars matters, and we need this to be gorgeously depicted, and it's a great cover. And which also,
don't think Barretto's actually done the cover here. I'm not 100% sure.
No, it has a credit to it has a signature here from Dorman, and I see cover artist on the inside, Dave Dorman, who I don't know.
There we go.
Offhand, but great stuff. Great sort of classical painting, almost to the Drew Struzan who did the original Star Wars posters, echoing that sort of classic painted style. But the other thing I'll say about this, just looking at this, I have nostalgia for, man, this looks like a Dark Horse Star Wars comic, doesn't it?
Oh,
just this cover. Even the way it's the New Hope 1 of 4, I'm like, oh man, I remember going to the comic book store and getting these Star Wars comics and going, okay, I have 1 and 3. I need 2 of 4, for whatever storyline I was collecting or whatever. I both miss and don't miss the days of digging through hoping to find something where I can't just go online and type in a thing and get a comic sent to me.
Well, speaking of typing in comics, I do want to, before we get into the comic proper, I do want to harp a little bit on how we're reading these comics. I don't know, I'm assuming you're using the Marvel Unlimited app, yeah?
Sure. Yeah.
To display the comic as we do on the YouTube version of this show, which if you're only listening to the show, please come join us over on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces and the comic we're talking about in the midst of them. But the browser version of Marvel Unlimited, boy, it could use some work. Just put that.
Oh wow, I've never used the browser. I do it on my iPad. I've never.
Yeah, and to find the book we're talking about today, I actually had to use like Google search Kung Fu to find it specifically. I couldn't do it through the search function of Marvel Unlimited on the browser.
I will say, even the app version has its issues in terms of finding things.
Yeah.
The recent update to it, and this is what people tune in for, but the recent update to it, I have found, I used to be able to browse book, because I used to just go on there without a plan and just go, What do you got? Let's see what looks interesting to me. That's harder to do. My just casual browsing of Marvel Unlimited and discovering stuff where I'm like, I didn't know there was this series from this artist. Oh, whatever. That's harder now. And so I did have to, I even had to go, specifically it's like Star Wars On New Hope Special Edition here.
Yeah. I went as far as having to use like the issue number, the release date, and quotes so that I was getting that exact wordage via a Google search, not on the website itself.
Man, I know that's like what a modern problem, but it is like, Jesus, that is so much work in today's world. So
Anyway.
let's you want to crack this thing open?
Speaking of work, I want to highlight something here that we haven't seen thus far in the Star Wars comics, but
I
is
think
so
it's the same.
key to my appreciation and reading of Star Wars comics, and that is this fucking timeline on the right.
Yeah, man. I used to have a bookmark from Dark Horse that had this timeline on it too, where it had like a cool Boba Fett painting on the front, on the back. It was like, and it was like each book you'd pick up, you have to go, okay, now see, where does the? All right, if this is where New Hope is, then this is this. Kids, this is how it used to be for us. And we didn't have Wikipedia.
But I want to call this out for a couple of reasons. One, this was kind of like how I navigated Star Wars for the longest time, was timelines like this. And specifically, though, if you look at the period just before the book we're talking about here, so we've got this big crunch in the timeline. That's where all the prequel stuff is that hasn't happened yet.
Yes, that's true, because it's all... is this actually like Old Republic stuff? Is that what the Tale, or the Tales of the Jedi stuff, right?
Tales of the Jedi stuff is like even older.
I remember dabbling in those comics.
And like some of that stuff I'm pretty familiar with, like the Sith War stuff, the Dark Lords of the Sith, because that was all tied in with KOTOR as well.
Right. Yes. But
it would be in a few years, not as of the release of this book.
But at the release of this book, where that crunch is also because Lucas is actively making the prequels at this point. So it almost seems like a conscious thing to go, I'm gonna wait, because it's we're 2 years out from Phantom Menace at this point. So it's like we really can't commit to anything in that time.
But the stuff that you and I grew up on is the stuff that I want to talk about later. And part of the reason we started this show, and one of the reasons I'm excited to get to this stuff later, and why we won't be so like slavishly sticking with the old Marvel stuff and kind of hopping around going forward, is that you look down at the bottom of this timeline here, post Return of the Jedi, and you've got some of my favorite Star Wars stories. We've got the Rogue Squadron comic, we've got Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Dark Empire, Empire's End, like all of that stuff is stuff that that was my Star Wars.
Same here, man. I never missed an issue of Rogue Squadron. That was my Star Wars comic, man. I loved it. I remember when Dark Empire came out, that was like, oh my god, Luke Skywalker has a love interest and he might go to the dark side. All that stuff was just like, and that it was all it was less like final in a way than it is now. I mean, we treated it as canon, but I'm talking about because it was a comic book, it was all like, could you imagine? More so than like now it's like a movie for people to go, I didn't like it. I don't remember anybody going, I was really disappointed by Dark Empire. I'm sure there were, but
Sure.
We were kids, so it was all just like, oh my god, new Star Wars stories.
Yeah. I mean, and especially those adaptations of the Thrawn books. We got Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising.
I still have my hardcover collection of those somewhere around here.
And you talk about like why do a comic book adaptation, but like that's how I absorbed those stories at first.
Same here.
Before I read the novels.
And same with Shadows of the Empire for me as well. Actually, I read the Shadows of the Empire comic, and then of course that whole which we'll get into that. We'll have to do like a whole Shadows of the Empire special, because that was like the massive multimedia push for that. And like the thing about that was like the comic was different than the novel was different than the video game. They kind of all like flowed together.
Yeah. No, it's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that timeline because it does, like when I cracked this book open, despite the flaws that we're going to talk about going forward, this like returned me into a centered position of Star Wars fandom that I hadn't felt in a while.
Absolutely. It really does take you back to, I'm not going to say a bad, but a simpler time as a Star Wars fan. It's a simpler time. A more civilized age, one might say.
But yeah, let's keep going, because right off the bat, we can see such a huge departure from that 1977 adaptation when we devote a whole page to A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away.
That is one of the biggest things, and there's a little bit like what we were talking about with the cover too, and now the timeline as well. Star Wars is a thing now, so it's like it needs to be put up on a pedestal. It needs to be lovingly recreated. So it's like, oh, you want to see that font on a star field? Oh yeah, this is Star Wars, baby, and it is like, in a way that there's no iconography. I mean, as we talked about for the first several issues, they're not even using the Star Wars logo over at Marvel. They're using that dumb thing with the stars in it. So, yeah, it is sort of a thing where it's like every bit of Star Wars is iconic now.
Right. So when we get to the next page, and it is a faithful recreation of the blockade runner flying away and the back of the Star Destroyer, as we get our opening crawl in the narrative text here, which is word for word the stuff we saw in the movie, as opposed to an adaptation of the shooting script.
Correct. And yeah, all of a sudden, look at the detail on this Star Destroyer, man. You're like, oh, this is drawn by somebody who's waited their whole life to draw this Star Destroyer or whatever, right? Like, it's sort of, as opposed to like, I mean, Chaykin was just like, I got to get this out. Here you go. This is kind of what they showed me. Now it's like, oh, every individual engine port and thing and detail. And yes. And even the stars are so thought out in this, right?
Right.
And the planet below. Yeah. I will say the slavish devotion of the script is, I guess, to be expected, but also at least a welcome change from the needlessly added prose of one Roy Thomas.
Yeah. I will say this about this book we're going to be covering here. Nothing has been needlessly added.
No. That is the big thing, which I will say makes it a somewhat boring read as somebody who's seen this movie a billion times.
Yeah.
But just go ahead. Yeah.
It creates this sense of skimming, like you said, where your mind is sort of filling in the blanks, because Star Wars is such the established thing that it is, that you can kind of see key frames as presented in this comic, and the music fills in, the text fills in, the sound effects fill in. So there's a lot. This book feels a little lazier because of that. When we get in here, we don't have any sound effects present. We don't have any like motion lines. We don't have any real dynamic motion in the panel, because your brain is filling in exactly what's happening here.
It's filling exactly what's happening, and because as this thing you're talking about, there's a bridge nature to this, right? There is this sense of like, oh man, this is like the network TV version of Star Wars or something, right? It feels less epic. It feels like, we're just going to play the beats you need to know. It's like somebody telling you the Star Wars story. So it's like, I don't know, then like, I don't know, Darth Vader comes on the ship or something.
Let's go to the next page, because I think that like really typifies what we're talking about here. Is we get a quick brief scene of 3PO and R2 moving about the corridors of the Tantive 4, and we get the scene where the Empire breaches and Darth Vader comes aboard the ship, but it's all done in a single page. So like we're losing those moments of tension as the rebels are waiting for the door to come down, but those are all getting filled in the gutters by your brain.
Exactly, because so much of what I love about that first scene of Star Wars, which is such a great opening, is, especially if you've if you're seeing it for the first time, which I know is hard for people like you and I to remember seeing it. I have no memory of seeing it for the first time, not really. But I remember watching this like VHS a lot. But that moment when all the rebels are loading up their rifles and they're waiting at the door, and you're just sitting there going, "Oh, the filmmaking's so good." Of like, what's coming through there? We don't know what the context of this is. And instead, the focus is on 3PO and R2 because the people making this book already know they're the characters to focus on.
Yeah. And this compressing...
And we're just moving plot.
...really comes at the cost of the dialogue and the beats of the dialogue. And the letterer is only so much to blame. I was mostly joking earlier. But, like, when we have these moments of... 3PO saying all at once, "There'll be no escape for the princess this time, what's that?" As though it's all kind of like one sentence. And having breaks in the dialogue bubbles is so key to giving pacing to dialogue in comics.
Yeah.
So it can make, and we'll get more egregious examples of this going forward in the book, but there are definitely moments where it feels like some iconic dialogue is all shoved into a single bubble because that's the panel you have.
Well, and because we're doing this thing, and we've talked about this before on other podcasts we've done, because particularly American monthly comics you've got your 22 pages, so it is like we have 4 issues, we have 88 pages of comic to get this movie across. So you really are you're making decisions based on pre-allotted space as opposed to just going, I think this scene should take 4 pages. It's like, I have to do this in 1 page. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about, I want it clear, we're not really harping on the creative team of this. They've been given an assignment, and they're being forced to make decisions mostly just because of how comics are printed, right?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously this had to come out on a timetable to align probably with the release of the special editions themselves.
Yeah.
This
February of 97.
That was when the special editions dropped?
That was when A New Hope came out, because I distinctly remember February, March, and then April. My birthday's in April, and for my birthday, we went to the Return of the Jedi one, and they came out a month apart. So,
and this issue was released January 8th, 1997.
So, yeah, because this, especially at this point, where we saw the original comic in reaction to the movie, we're now in a place where the comics are part of the promotion for a movie.
Yeah, and so by the time we get to April, when issue 4 of this is released, I have not checked it, and maybe I should have done some more due diligence to this, but I would be curious to see when the Empire and Jedi special editions also come out.
It would have been interesting. You would have thought they would have done it as 3 like graphic novels or something, right? Like each one, because the movies came out a month apart when they re-released them. So crazy to think about too that was #1 at the box office. That New Hope re-release, a movie people have already seen 20 years ago and could see anytime they want, but it was like, we got to go back to the theater for this. And I remember like my dad being like actually emotional about, I get to share this theatrical experience with my son of a thing I saw as a kid. And it was like, oh my God, you have no idea what you're about to experience. You've seen Star Wars, but not like this.
Right. No,
and
I
think
had
that
a very
was
similar
part
experience.
Of it. Well, I think that was part of it, was like our generation that just grew up with Star Wars as a ubiquitous pop culture thing, we got to come as close to experiencing it for the first time again. That was part of it. And then, yes, the previous generation being able to go, now I can take my kids. It really was, that is the thing I miss a little bit about the simpler time of Star Wars, right? When it was sort of a singular thing that was untouched, really, right? Like, I mean, look, I love all the Star Wars stuff that's come, but now it's such a franchise and IP, and there's a million things, and some people can watch some and not others. But it used to be like, oh my God, are they putting Star Wars back in theaters? Star Wars means everything to me, and when I say that, I mean this movie.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm looking through, and again, maybe this is just an issue of being able to find stuff on Marvel Unlimited, but I do not see either the special edition of Empire or Jedi in comic book form here. So I'm wondering.
Oh, interesting.
I know there are adaptations of them in comic book form, but
I definitely had the Empire one. Yeah.
Yeah. But leastways, let's get back to this comic because, we have Darth Vader coming into the hallway here, and on the next page, we get a extremely truncated version of the Leia is captured scene, missing my favorite line of dialogue. You know, that they had in the original comics. I've set mine to kill!
Oh, that was awesome, yeah. That was awesome. The thing that's crazy is you don't see her put the info in R2.
I know, right? Like, this is the first, I think, really big example of this abridged thing of we get no, even like in silhouette, of the classic Leia leaning over and putting in the data disk into R2.
We see Leia captured, and then it's just in dialogue between 3PO and R2 that you get that he has the plans, which is just kind of bad storytelling. If we didn't have the movie to fill in gaps, I would say this is bad comics writing.
Yeah,
you're like, wait, what?
I think this is this comic overall is a pretty poor adaptation of Star Wars.
Agreed. It in its seeking out the brevity of it. It is leaving out a lot of key things. The abridgment is doing real damage to this as a story on its own, beyond just like, I want to see scenes from a movie I like on a comics page.
Right.
But like actually telling a narrative, trouble.
Skipping right from the Darth Vader coming in saying, "I find me the passengers, I want them alive," to Leia getting stunned within 2 panels of each other is really jarring.
Well, and like if you go back to that page, the Vader entrance, while kind of a cool drawing of Vader, doesn't really have like, isn't presented as like, oh shit, it's Darth Vader. Because like when he comes in the movie, I mean, he's just walking down a hallway, but the music, the framing, everything about it is like, oh shit, this dude's the badass.
Also, he is not leading the charge, which I always found interesting in that first movie.
Yes,
he's coming in after the stormtroopers just to sweep through the hallways and go, "Did y'all fuck this up?"
Yeah, it's sort of like, I mean, that's another thing. It presents him as, oh, this is the boss. Instead, here it seems like he's like, charge into the battlefield, my men.
Which, there's obviously a place for Darth Vader to do that. I've seen great comics where Darth Vader's leading the charge, but...
And that's what I'm saying, like, in isolation, this panel looks awesome with him reaching out his hand and them all shooting by him, and he's like, tear this ship apart! But even the way he says that in the movie is, he's like walking away when he says it in the movie. He's like, tear this ship apart!
Well, he's also, like, pointing at one of the stormtroopers being like,
yeah.
I want those prisoners, I want them alive.
He's barking orders, and it's awesome. Like, it is, you just go, here you don't get as much of the military commander. You get, like, this guy going, oh, yeah, shoot everybody, man.
And on the next page, we actually miss one of the things that makes Darth Vader so scary is we totally lose the whole him choking a dude to death on the Tantive 4. The whole, like,
yes.
This is an ambassadorial ship. It's like, if this is an ambassadorial ship, where is your ambassador? Crushed larynx.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing about this comic, because when we talk about what is the audience for this, people like you and I who know this movie backwards and forwards are going, where's this? Where's that? So it's frustrating, but seemingly aren't people like us the people they want to sell this comic to?
And again, there's a collector mentality to this. There's a whole resurgence of the collector mentality because of the release of the special editions in theaters. There was a fervor around this time that I think you and I were maybe like a little too young to really grasp.
Yeah, that's true. Like, the big thing about it, of course, for me, the 97, was the action figures, and I'm sure you also had a million of those. And that was because I think of our age and our interest was more like, oh my god, those what were they like? Oh, that whole run of action figures, those 3 and they were a little bit big. They're like 4-inch figures.
4-inch figures, yeah. They were like slightly bigger than the original Kenner run, but
smaller than your average figure.
Yeah, they weren't 6 inches, but they could all fit in that like Millennium Falcon carrying case, and they were all like pretty decent molded plastic. Not a ton of articulation, but you could have a crap ton of them.
Oh, and I had a million of them. I mean, just absolutely. You know, that was that era when they were pretty cheap too. I remember they were also like $5 as opposed to $6 or something. Like they're $4, whatever. They were like $1 cheaper. So that was where you're going like, yes, I have Death Star control operative or whatever. You know, you start to have like nameless characters. As you're like, man, if we're going to Fred Meyer, I'm getting a Star Wars guy.
You'd best bet I had Nia Nub.
Oh yeah, that kind of thing. You know, that's I had Biggs, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing where you're going like, yeah, man. So we get them, but yeah, within 3 pages or 2 pages. Is it 2 pages? No, it's 3 pages because we have the opening thing. We've already got 3PO and R2 on their way down to Tatooine.
Yeah. And we get this confrontation between Leia and Vader, and
Is this a weird pose on Vader? This is a weird pose on Vader to me.
Yeah,
What's
I'm
he
not quite
his
sure.
Leg up on. Why is his knee bent?
Because his back foot is moving. It's like he's walking forward.
But it's such a weird thing to like when it's a still image to be like he's lurching forward like not a person.
I mean, there's an argument to be made. What do you think of Vader's speech bubbles in this with like the pink accents?
I like the idea that Vader is separated in some way, like a mechanical voice. I don't know why pink speech bubbles are the choice, though.
I know this is just a result of retroactively this is what my mind goes to now, but like to me those are Gwenpool's speech bubbles at this point in my head.
Yeah. Well, yes, but I think even aside from if you take the literal thing about Gwenpool, it's a bubblegum pop. You know, it seems young. It seems feminine. It's an odd choice for a booming mechanical voice.
Yeah, and I don't know.
It just reads weird.
Association between the mechanical raspiness of Darth Vader and these, speech bubbles are. Again, it's really just to highlight the difference that he talks differently somehow. But seems odd. Yeah.
But we see that in a lot of Star Wars comics, and they'll do it in sort of like the zigzaggy, like computerized way, or in some. I mean, there's lots of ways to. I love when people play with the word bubbles to make characters seem different on the page. But it's more like what's going on here?
Yeah.
It's just an odd choice. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like there's any thought to it. They just go do something different. I don't know, pink. Okay.
Well, and I've also seen pink and like redder speech bubbles used if like someone's like dying or in pain. You can use that color to accentuate like there's like tearing of flesh or blood involved in their words.
What if they had made this like a deeper red, more like the Sith red? You know, that could have been more foreboding. The pink is weird. It's too light for this villainous character, I think.
Actually, never mind, John. I take back everything I said, because we all know that pink is Anakin Skywalker's favorite color, so this is clearly just an homage to what will come later.
He hates sand, but he loves pink.
It's true. Yeah, that's the line they cut from Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
I hate sand.
No, I don't think people need to.
Coarse and rough and gets everywhere, but pink really makes me feel good inside.
Yeah. Padme, do you have a pink dress you could put on? You could really relax.
I don't think she does.
Chew this bubble. No, I don't remember her ever appearing. Pink is actually really not a color you see a lot in Star Wars.
Yeah, now that you say that, yeah, interesting. Maybe that's why it feels.
Maybe it does sort of not feel of the universe.
Yeah, interesting.
All right. Also, that's a wonky looking stormtrooper helmet on that. Third
that I blame the anchor on that one. We lost some details on that one.
I will say one of my big notes across the board in this. Interesting where there's a lot of detail and where there's not a lot of detail in this comic, because like the faces in this are really undetailed for the most part, which I think is interesting.
But you get every little pouch on a stormtrooper's utility belt.
That's the thing where I'm going like it's interesting what you're focusing on, and it does sort of feel like the fandom of a kid who grew up with the toys and going, I want to render the cool shit that these guys are wearing or whatever. But then it's like, I don't know, Leia's face is like a couple lines. You know, it's just interesting.
I think it speaks to another one of those things where your head is going to fill in more details about what Carrie Fisher's face looks like, and so actually the fewer details are actually there, the less you will have to like nitpick details about what the actual face looks like.
Until we get to Peter Cushing. Once again, they can't not lovingly render that man who just had one of the great faces in film history.
Or 3PO. Let's go to this next page to where we hard cut to... Let's compress all of the droid wandering through the desert thing down to a single page, which again, I'm not against.
Well, I agree, because it is it's always the thing where I go, look, Star Wars, one of the greatest movies ever made, yeah, but that section with the droid's a little long. It's always the thing, I feel like every time I watch, I forget just how long it takes to get to Luke Skywalker. Yeah. Because you're like, shit, it's like 20 minutes before we get to the main character. That's
but 3PO's face in this middle panel here is like, suddenly he has a skull head.
Yeah, 3PO is also kind of inconsistent in this thing and moves in weird ways, as always.
I mean, it's tough to...
Comics love to... It's the thing where it's like, 3PO is freed up. We've talked about this in the 70s books. 3PO is freed up because he's a drawing now, but I want him to still move like the guy in the limited costume because that's what 3PO moves like.
At least we're not getting R2's legs literally walking forward.
No, they do understand how R2 functions. Or when he didn't he grab something or like push something with one of his legs, like an arm and that? And you're like, what is going on here? So they wander the desert for a page here, and R2 is taken by this sandcrawler, and we don't even see 3PO taken by the sandcrawler.
To be fair, we don't see 3PO taken by the sandcrawler in the movie either.
I guess that
we
is
do
true.
do the thing here where 3PO just sees the sandcrawler in the distance and he waves it down, and then once R2 is taken, he finds 3PO again in the sandcrawler.
I guess that's true. It's just this is forcing me to think about that, because it's like 3PO sees the sandcrawler, boom, close up of R2, boom, they've got him. When we go to the next page.
Yeah, look, we go from droids have just landed on Tatooine to on the next page at the bottom panel, suddenly we're introduced to the Lars family in rapid succession.
Oh, it's wild, man, because all we get is this one panel of this, and you better believe any new special edition imagery is in this comic, obviously.
Oh, the CG transport ship that is slowly taking off in the background in the special edition is here now.
Yeah.
The dewbacks are in full force.
Yeah, that's the dewbacks. I was trying to remember the name. Yeah, because we get this scouting party that's just our little transitional thing going, I'm looking over here. All right. Cut
Look,
to...
sir,
now they're... Yeah, and now they're being...
In the art here, we have this stormtrooper saying, "Look, sir, droids." In the movie, we push in on him and he holds up like a sprocket or something to be like, there's some indication that there are droids here. In this art, we're just like,
I like?
"Look, sir, droids." Do they see the droids in the distance? What's going on here?
He's holding the sprocket, but it's far in the background. Look at that guy saying, "Look, sir, droids." He's looking at something in his hand, but it's so small and undetailed that you're like, huh?
Yeah, because we need that big art of the dewback up front.
The dewback and the guy with the binoculars, that's the important thing about this scene, not critical evidence. This is a thing where I'm going, dude, just give me 2 panels. Take this, cut it in 2, and go, even if you just did like a close-up of the hand holding it and said, "Look, sir, droids." Sorry to Monday morning quarterback this comics writing, but...
No, it's okay, because you could even do it as a reverse of the panel below it, because we've got an inset panel here showing the sandcrawler in the distance as like the vista shot in the smaller planet, and then the larger panel is what happens after that, which is them arriving at the Lars homestead.
That is at least... That is an attempt to, in a short amount of time, convey movement and passage of time. I commend that.
Mm-hmm. And they could have done something very similar in the panel above with like an inset panel with a hand holding the thing with dialogue saying, "Look, sir, droids."
Yeah, I just think it's... Yeah, it's just weird. It's more just like, "Look, sir, droids." What? Mm-hmm. Where?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So let's go to the next page, and we've got Uncle Owen...
and Luke. Our introduction to Luke here is so sudden, as opposed to in the movie when we have Aunt Beru like calling him out and saying, "Luke, Luke." We just get him coming in behind Uncle Owen here.
I don't think Lucas is like known for being an amazing director, but much like what I was talking about the Darth Vader, the introduction of Luke is also like, oh, as an audience, you go, visual movie language is telling me this guy. Luke, he turns, he runs, you're going like, okay, that's a main character introduction. That's a villain introduction. Han Solo gets a similar, you know what I mean? Like there is an Obi-Wan. He's very good. Lucas is always very good at the iconography of stuff. And this is kind of just going like, I don't know, there's this guy standing there.
Yeah. And again, your brain is filling in a lot of the details here of this whole transition, because within a page, we already are getting to Luke uncovering the message of Leia.
This was wild. This was wild to me. This is one of the most like jarring, where it's like, whoa, because we lose all the stuff about the droid that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
That's all
Skippy.
Gone. That's all gone. But I think
he has a name, John. His name is Skippy. He may be possessed by a Force ghost. We'll get into that comic later.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I do remember some of that stuff. Also, this this first thing, this Jawa head that's turned is weird. I want to say it's another weird, like, position.
We don't even get any dialogue from the Jawas, which I found weird. Like, Utini is an established sound effect at this point. I played the Star Wars Droids PC game where you're building your own droids, and Utini was featured prominently.
Dude, Utini is my life. But it is sort of like when we're talking. It's so interesting, as we've talked about. The Star Wars is so iconic at this point. So when you're leaving out stuff, Yeah, the Jawas don't matter in this, and the Jawas are a small but memorable part of the movie. So it's so weird to me that there's like none of the negotiation with them, none of the sense of, you talk about the appeal of the world building of this, none of these droid dealers, and you don't get what I think is a key 3PO R2 moment of going, hey, what about that one? That's basically going, that's my friend. You should take him, right? Like, I think that's key for 3PO's character.
Yeah. In fact,
Instead it's just like, oh.
There is no bit of dialogue on this comics page establishing that they're buying R2.
No!
it literally cuts from Uncle Owen saying, "Can you speak Bocce?" 3PO going, "Of course, sir. Bocce is like a second language to me." And he says, "All right, shut up. I'll take this one. Luke, take these two over to the garage." These two, he never indicated a second one.
100%. That is, once again, that's objectively bad storytelling.
Yeah.
And
then we hard cut to him going, "You two know of the rebellion against the Empire," and
whoa.
None of the whole, like, oh, we were aboard a starship, oh, your friend's a little banged up. The lead into that discussion about, oh, these two droids have seen battle.
And also, this transition, visually on a page, is wild. This cut, you don't want to do this kind of wild shift in place and time like this in the middle of a page. There's nothing, they don't do, like the cutaway with the scout troopers. Actually did work as a transition. Here, there's no transition. It's just like, and hours later, inside, somewhere.
Yeah, and again, we're losing so much in the gutters here that you, as a fan of Star Wars who's been watching this movie for 20 years, are, I guess, expected to just fill it in your brain. So you've got to... It forces you to ask the question, who is this story for? And the answer is only Star Wars fans. You cannot read this without having seen the movies.
But as a Star Wars fan, this thing is pissing me off too. So it's weird. It's weird. And so yeah, we get the hologram of Leia that comes out of this. It comes out of R2, and we set up the whole.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. What's this? Oh, she's beautiful. Don't worry, she's your sister.
I do want to talk about some stuff later. I think actually in the next issue that we'll get to about when they start. Like, now that they know that, it's interesting to see how they draw Luke and Leia.
Something I do notice in this book just as a whole is a supreme lack overall of R2-D2 sound effects. We get a little bit here, but
you get
overall,
like a beep,
we don't
chirp.
have much. Yeah.
Well, because we have a ton over in the 70s, so we're kind of used to like... Well,
and
but
like,
yeah,
I've seen other books that use that to great effect as well.
Yeah, they're just better at writing words that aren't completely insane. We're going, what? Then we get, of course, we go to the next page. He says he's the property of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Wonder if he means old Ben Kenobi. And then Luke's got to go to dinner. And kind of, you talk about the detail or lack of detail. Look at this detail on Aunt Beru. She is so lovingly rendered.
Yeah, and whereas Uncle Owen kind of looks like a bunch of putty that was thrown together.
Yeah, I was gonna say Uncle Owen's looking rough in this book, man.
I mean, he's got some city miles on him, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, that's time out in the sun, farming moisture, man. And then yeah, we get all this stuff about your father. I mean, this is all to be expected. But okay, let's get to the end of this thing and just focus on the complete downplaying of got to be a top 5 most iconic Star Wars shot. Luke looking at the twin suns.
Yeah, and we don't have
and
the
it's just
suns.
Jammed. We don't have the suns, and it's just jammed into this last panel. And 3PO's here. Luke's doing the pose, but none of the iconography of one of the central images of Star Wars that's conjured up. You don't see a montage of Star Wars clips that doesn't probably start with that, right? Like that is the wanderlust and yearning for adventure that is the catalyst. That's sort of the thing that makes us all Luke Skywalker, right? We're all supposed to feel that, like, oh man, I know what this is.
If I could just escape beyond this horizon, there's a better life for me out there.
It's the thing. It's the thing that separates things like Star Wars from other science fiction when it's remembering to tell a human story, right?
Yeah.
And here it's just like, I don't know, he's looking off the panel somewhere and this robot's talking to him.
Boy, I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, man, boy, I didn't think it was possible, but they found a way to make Luke even whinier.
Well, I'll take whiny over rage monster that we got in the 70s comics. So.
Well, yeah, he needs to get on some sort of chemical imbalance issue or something. He needs to talk to somebody in the 70s book. My God.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So-
there you go. And then all of a sudden, but once again, it's like, quick, we're throwing this in. It's like, hey, R2's gone. Cut to the next page. We're looking for him.
Yep, we're off in the land speeder. We're cruising around, and we've got it on our scanner. Might be our little R2 in. Hit the accelerator. They catch up with R2, and we'll have no more of this Obi-Wan Kenobi bullshit. But then, what's this? It's the.
I thought that was a
Tusken
bold change by the. Yeah, I thought all that dialogue you just said was bold changes, though, from the script. The fuck you doing, you little droid? But no, yeah, I just love, once again, panel about R2's missing. Next panel, we found him.
Yeah, and again, like really, really crunching of moments here. So we have, what's this? Several creatures approaching from the southeast. In the movie, we have a couple of minutes of Luke crawling up this ridge, looking down. We see the banthas in the distance. Here, it's literally just a couple of dots on the horizon with some dust clouds rising up, and him going sand people, and then immediately is jumped by a Tusken Raider coming at him from behind.
Also, one of the great movie jump scares is that the sand person being in his binoculars, and all the tension, all the scares of that are just like, I don't know. It does just feel like we just gotta, come on, guys, you know Star Wars. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Also, I don't know how you'd phonetically write a sand person scream or a Tusken Raider shout, but I don't think it would be.
It wouldn't be this.
Yog!
Yog! No, yeah, I don't. That is weird. And then all of a sudden, I do like, we've talked about a lack of sound effects, and all of a sudden we get a lot of sound effects. Bang, crunch, wham!
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden things get real comic booky real fast.
We also get, one of the things that was famously changed in the special editions is the sound effect that Obi-Wan makes when he scares off the sand people, which
Yes.
I think they would honestly need to change it again these days, because there is the whole thing, like, in every adaptation, like, novelization, they always usually say that he's doing some kind of scream of the crate dragon, which now that we've seen one of those in Star Wars is...
Yeah, we need to go back and change it again to match up.
Yeah.
But whereas we saw in the 70s one, and we made a lot of fun of them writing it as him going, woo!
Well, because in the original theatrical version, it is this, like, loud ululation of, ooh.
Yeah, it's kind of a ghosty sound, yeah. Here, they've decided to way underplay it by showing him in the distance going, nang!
Or is it hog? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I like the Jerry Lewis, nice lady.
No, the Tusken Raiders.
And the Tusken Raider's like, let's get out of here. He's going to do some pratfalls. God, we're going to have to watch The Nutty Professor. Yeah.
And not the Eddie Murphy one.
And also, I will say, when we... not the good one. Sorry to... If some Jerry Lewis fans are watching, I'm sorry, but the Eddie Murphy one's better. But I do think bold decision here to recast Obi-Wan Kenobi as Sean Connery. Because look at that middle panel at the bottom. That's Connery, man.
Yeah, wow. And I mean...
Of course. He's me.
Boy, wouldn't these movies be different if Connery was Obi-Wan.
I haven't gone by the name of Obi-Wan since before you were born.
But this is another example of dialogue being, like, really compressed down into smaller and smaller bubbles, to where we lose any of the dramatic effect of him saying, well, of course I know him. He's me. And then no break. He just continues to roll into, of course I know him. He's me. I haven't gone by Obi-Wan since before you were born.
Yeah.
There's no pause. Like, there's no... I mean, you lose a lot of the performative aspects in a comic book, right?
In general, but they've really made it seem like, oh, hello there, I'm this and that, and I'm Obi-Wan, and let's go. You know, there's no sense of You also lose. I mean, of course, you lose a lot of the point, but like even the way the hello there, not just because it's iconic, but because it speaks to the droid. It goes, "Come out from there." Like it speaks to this thing about I just saw him be scary to this sandfield. Now he's being kind to this droid. It's telling you a lot about Obi-Wan's character, all that stuff. And here he's just going, "Hello, everybody, come with me."
I mean, we don't even get the hello there at all.
No, I'm still bummed about that. 2 adaptations of this and no hello there, which is, of course, as I think I mentioned before, my text alert on my phone still to this day is hello there.
Same.
I think it's
Though mine's Ewan
technic-
McGregor.
Mine is actually Ewan McGregor as well, but, or it could be the guy from Clone Wars. Who knows? He's so fucking good at doing that. But I think it is. I think it is the Revenge of the Sith one in particular. Hello there when he drops.
But
in.
yeah, we skip straight to suddenly we're at Obi-Wan's house.
And we're just busting out this lightsaber right now.
And the immediate jump in dialogue to "You fought in the Clone Wars" is...
It's the
like,
same jump as the other one, too. It's like, you guys are in rebellion battles? You fought in the Clone Wars? It's like, man, it almost seems like Luke is just sitting down with people and going, so tell me about the violence you've been involved in.
I'm really fixated on any kind of trauma that might drudge up.
Yeah. Did you kill anybody? Did you ever off a guy, Obi-Wan? Oh, a lot. And yes, we get all this stuff, and it's. I mean, I do like the drawings of this. It's once again, it's more lovingly rendered. I like this shot. He does look more like Alec Guinness now. Of this sort of this big panel here with the other panels around it of him holding the lightsaber. Mm-hmm. It's all once again the where it chooses to focus on. It knows certain moments are important in a way the '70s comic didn't.
Yeah, but those moments are spoiled by the pacing, right?
Yeah, because look at all this dialogue that's jammed in here. We get the, yes, I fought in the Clone Wars. I was a Jedi. I knew your father. He was killed by a guy named Darth Vader. Here's his lightsaber. Let's talk about the Force. And all of this is happening like bump, 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 bump down the page. Just like, wow, this is just an information download.
And it is in those scenes as well, but Alec Guinness gives it more of a gravitas, and he lingers on certain moments a little bit.
Hot take, he was pretty good at acting.
Yeah, turns out.
Anybody ever see a little film called Bridge on the River Kwai? He's okay in it. But yeah, no, it is just kind of, when you see it in black and white like this, you're just going, oh yeah, it's just him going, and this, and that, and the Force, and the Jedi, and the Clone Wars, and the things.
Come with me to Alderaan. I'm not going to Alderaan.
Well, okay, he's going to go to Alderaan because Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru will also be killed off very quickly, too. Not on the next page, because, man, I will say, I really miss Vader with that cup of coffee.
I know, yeah. Next page, we cut back to the Death Star. We get Tarkin and Vader rolling in. We lose a ton of the bickering between the different admirals, which I think, there are certain choices that you'd have to make when making a book like this, where it's like, okay, what do we cut? And, some of the choices make logical sense to me. But, and this is one of them where it's just like, okay, we can lose some of the Admiralty bickering amongst themselves about how to use the Death Star properly.
I love that stuff because one of my favorite things in Star Wars is, corporate middle management, red tape in the Empire. I love it. But this is an example of where a bridging works, where it gets the point across. A guy is disagreeing with Vader. Vader chokes him. That's what you need to know. You need to see this sort of civilized, corporate round table, and then a guy come in with force powers and choke a guy until he agrees with him. Mm-hmm. That's key. That sets up the dynamic here. And it also sets up, which is always an interesting thing about A New Hope, right, is that Tarkin, at least Vader's sort of letting him act like he's on the leash, right? That Tarkin go, enough of this, Vader, release him. And I fucking love this drawing of Peter Cushing, one of my all-time favorite actors, so...
There's also a strange addition here when Vader says the guy's name, Commander Tag. I know his name because of comics and years of war. His name's actually never said in the movie.
I thought that was the case. Yeah. I was going to ask you because you have a little bit more immediate with the. I always just forget everyone's names anyway.
Sure,
or I have a tough time sometimes with that.
If names are specifically called out in the movie, I can usually remember them. It's when these deeper layer characters like Commander Tag and Admiral Modi and stuff, whose names are never actually said in the films.
Right. That's it exactly where I'm going. And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't remember. I think that was my reaction. Was like, I would have remembered him saying that. I don't remember. So that is interesting that this is now like, well, we better put that in.
Well, because we've had 20 years to know that, like, oh, that's an important character that we've covered in novels and other comics. We're going to say his name.
I love that they render his sideburns, because I do think of the sideburns as being very iconic. Because I always love the stuff in the original movie where the 70s ekes in a little bit, like those
With
sideburns.
mustaches
Like,
and sideburns, yeah.
yeah, where you're going like, whoa, that's a weird thing for like a high command guy in a fascist regime to look like.
Biggs Darklighter has one of the most epic mustaches in Star
Oh
Wars.
god, that's a full-on Reynolds level stash in that thing, man. He's smoothing it down.
Yeah, and talk about weird pacing, though. Hard cut to Lucas suddenly back at the homestead.
This isn't for a single panel.
And without any introduction into the finding the destroyed sandcrawler to lead him back here.
And without one of the great, like, the whole thing about, like, then that would lead them home. And you could do that in ... home, or go to another word bubble, which this guy is wont to do.
But no,
I love
we hard cut to the Lars homestead and an inset dialogue box that says, these blaster points are too accurate for sand people, only Imperial
What are they
stormtroopers
talking
so
about?
precise.
We're not looking at the sandcrawler. What the hell are we talking about?
If you've not seen Star Wars, you will have no idea.
That is so weird.
Yeah.
That's bad. You guys, that's bad. It is. It's a thing where it's like, I'm not here to like harp on this, but just objectively, that's poor storytelling.
And it's just, again, I think bad adaptation. You can compress and change this story and it won't necessarily offend me. But doing it in such a way where the story you're now presenting starts to become nonsense, that's bad, like you say.
Well, and here's another thing where I'm going like, so it's interesting that they condense all this just so they can get in these 3 panels of Leia being questioned, which I actually think you could cut this, because we'll get the thing where they're going to blow up Alderaan and they're asking her about this.
Yeah,
I mean, I like this, but
we
it's
cut
sort
to the
of
next
an
page and we
interesting
see Dr. Ball, MD.
Oh, my favorite. What's your doctorate in? Poetry?
If anyone hasn't seen the Robot Chicken Star Wars bit about Dr. Ball, this little ball torture droid here.
With a great Seth MacFarlane performance of being like, I'm a doctor, damn it.
I was recently seeing a discussion online about like which Star Wars parody specials do you find superior, the like Family Guy or Robot Chicken, and like it's an interesting split actually. Though I think I personally lean Robot Chicken.
I do too, only because the Family Guy ones are more in the Airplane or Mel Brooks, where they're literally doing the movie. And I think particularly the sense of humor you and I enjoy is the weird side tangents of things. The Emperor saying Stormtrooper, that kind of stuff, where it's like the weird things within the world that are weird little gags, or Dr. Ball MD, or ride me like a tauntaun.
What the hell is an aluminum falcon?
Yeah, they what?
What do you mean they blew it up?
And I think what the Family Guy ones are very funny, but they are like they're much more of a commitment to like, okay, we're gonna recreate the thing, which is very funny. But yeah, I just think this is so like, this is super important that we just get. I mean, I guess if it's just for Dr. Ball inclusion, then okay.
Yeah.
Because I always thought
cut back to this. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say I always thought Dr. Ball was a funny design because he's just a little ball robot with a hypodermic needle.
But we cut back to. So we totally cut out the sandcrawler being destroyed by or by the stormtroopers, right?
Can I talk about this whole comic? Is Jawa erasure?
It really is, because in the background here we have one of the most chilling things from the original Star Wars, which is 3PO burning Jawa bodies.
Holy shit! Yeah, he's just casually doing that here.
But we have no context for where that is. We're suddenly just seeing a tiny panel of tiny Luke and tiny Obi-Wan, with Obi-Wan saying, there's nothing you could have done. So, like, according to the story logic of this comic, 3PO is burning the bodies of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru.
Which, as we know from seeing the movie, are already the crispiest of critters.
Jesus.
They were well done, sir.
Yeah.
Scorched. Just because that moment is so brutal in the movie, too. I remember even as a kid being like, ah!
And
Yeah.
all of this is so that Luke can say, I want to come with you to Alderaan. We've got to go get off-world. We get our scene of them looking down at Mos Eisley, and we've cut all of this and truncated everything so we can have this page of the special edition intro to Mos Eisley, which is an expanded scene from the films in which we get a bunch of CG monsters and people wandering around Mos Eisley just to make it feel a little bigger.
Which has always been not as egregious as the Han shooting first thing, but has always just been embarrassing too, because George Lucas loves a physical gag. He can't, like, there's so many additive things of like goofy shit, like not just how it looks, but like, oh, this jaw will fall, and you're just going like, oh yeah, the movie really needed that. These are the weirder changes. There's the ones that are actually damaging to the movie. Because I've much like if you're a listener to James Bonding and their argument about the most embarrassing Bond moment, I've had the ongoing argument, I'm sure you've been in these, Kirkoni, about the most egregious and damaging change in Special Edition. And I do think it has come down to Han shooting first or that fucking musical number in Jabba's palace.
It's Han shooting first or Snice Noodles, yeah.
It's gotta be, right? And
yes, I know that character's name.
As angry as Han shooting first goes, I think Snice Noodles is actually the more upsetting thing to me.
Yeah. Quick question, John, because I love doing this to you. Do you know the name of these giant creatures the Jawas are riding?
You know I don't. These things weren't even in the original movie. I think that's totally fair that I would not. What is this thing called?
It's called a Ronto.
Oh, that's a pretty boring name.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Whatever. I've never liked this.
So we get a whole scene of the Ronto like rearing up and the Jawa falling off, but we lose these aren't the droids you're looking for scene.
Another one of the most iconic. And once again, they tried to do it in this thing where it's like, how do we do that? He's just like, oh, the Force, whatever.
But we don't even get the dialogue of these aren't the droids you're looking for.
Which is, I mean, gotta be in the top, at least for sure top 10, if not top 5 Star Wars lines. Like, just in terms of pop culture recall of it, right?
It's the first use on screen of the Force, other than the Force choke. It's the first, oh, good guys have powers too moment.
And that's the thing where you're just going like, man, but it's just like, well, George said we gotta put the Jawas falling off the thing in there. That needs a whole giant panel. Because look at it, even within the page, that gets the bulk of this page is that, which has nothing to do with our characters.
Or even this panel in the middle here where we cut straight to, I don't know how he got past those troops. We couldn't have a panel before of him doing these aren't the droids you're looking for. Instead, we have to have the weird CGI floating robot that got added in the special edition on the left side of the panel here.
I mean, look at the way all of this is framed, even like when we cut out to the wide of them pulling up to the cantina, and we just get this alien for no reason just to add more aliens.
Yeah, and
It's all about, look at all the cool shit and stuff. This comic is doing the stuff I hate about some Star Wars stuff, when it becomes all world building and it's like, wait, you're actually not focusing on plot anymore.
Right, and we're just trying to have you bathe in the setting a little bit. And I can appreciate moments of that, of just like live in this world for a moment. Have a moment where we break to the cantina band and we're like, oh, what's a weird
That stuff's
flavor.
Great, but not when we're trying to conserve space and eliminating key character scenes, though.
Yeah. No, it's bad because we get in on the cantina, we lose the whole no droids here, and we cut straight to Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan. We don't even have Obi-Wan walk away from that sequence. It just happens right in front of him.
And he's just, I mean, dude, this is more violent than it is in the movie. Look at that blood exploding upwards off of his arm. Like, holy shit.
He definitely cuts both of these guys down, and I mean, I think there is an argument to be made that they could have walked away from the movie version. I don't think either of them are walking away from this one.
Oh no, these guys are all kinds of dead. Blood loss alone, man. Look at that blood. Also, which has never made sense to me because, of course, we established that the lightsaber cauterizes instantly.
Yes.
So I've never understood why there's like a bunch of blood around in the scene. And I know the answer is because they hadn't figured that out yet. But also just the like he fucking murders these two guys and it's like, "Hi, I'm Han Solo." Jesus Christ! No reaction to this.
Yeah, we don't get the whole "this is Chewbacca. He's the first man on a ship. Might be able to help us." And like, okay,
Chewbacca's just there.
Yeah, Chewbacca's just there with... Chewbacca's face is really weird in this panel. It gets better throughout the book, but it's got like these tiny little eyes and like... yeah, I don't know what's going on here.
Also, Han Solo in this second page here, which is like where you get to see more detail, he's looking old.
Yeah, we get the exchange between Obi-Wan and Luke and Han here. We cut to Han Solo. I think the Han Solo here on this next page, just before he confronts Greedo, doesn't look half bad, actually.
No, that's actually good. That's the thing. I mean, inconsistent design is still... It's not as egregious here, but it's like... There's definitely a like, well, we're cut in for close-ups that are more...
Yeah.
Because look at the thing before that. Like, Luke's eyes are just a single line.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of work is being done here to pointedly not include details so that your mind can kind of fill in.
But then they'll do these inset panels where it's like, we're going to do a real nice drawing of Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we get the Greedo. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
I mean, we have to talk about the elephant in the room here, which is Greedo shot first, John. I don't know what to tell you. It's clear as day right here on the page.
It's in this comic book, and by being two panels, it's actually even more egregious than the movie, where it's like, I love because this is the special edition comic, we get the drawing of Han doing this.
Yeah, the weird
right
jerky head motion. Because in the movie, how the special editions fucked with that scene. For those who don't know, and God, I guess there might be some people who don't know at this point.
Maybe. Well, I don't know why you're listening or watching this show if you don't, but go ahead.
I mean, but here's the thing. It's been so long now, there might have been people who can hear the phrase Han shot first and not really have the context for what that means.
That makes me sad that this has been long enough that there's a whole generation that only knows Greedo shooting first.
John, yeah, there are like 20-year-olds and 24-year-olds who have only ever known Greedo shooting first.
That hurts my heart.
But in the original movie, Han whips out his blaster and shoots Greedo as soon as Greedo threatens to kill him. Greedo doesn't even get a shot off. In the special edition released in 1997,
which is badass,
they added this really weird, jerky CG blur motion to Harrison Ford so that his head is whipped to the side as a blaster bolt goes off and he dodges it just in time to then pull his blaster and kill Greedo.
Yep.
So this book is making that like absurd thing that they added 20 years after the original movie came out. Into that's what happened canonically in order to make Han less ruthless, I guess.
I never understood that because it's not like Han shot him in cold blood. Greedo basically says, "I am going to kill you," and then Han shoots him, right?
Yeah, he says
like it was always in self-defense still. I never was like, and if anything, it was always the cool gunslinger thing of, I'm going to get you before you even have time. I always saw it as more of a quick draw thing, right? It's like, before you can even unholster it, I'm so badass. It actively damages how cool my favorite character in all of Star Wars is.
This scene does damage it, but I think it also doubles down on the awkwardness of the next scene we get Han in, and it'll be in a couple of pages, but they go out of their way to include in this book, which is his original confrontation with Jabba.
Yes. I do just want to point out before we leave this page, though, nice to see the Wolfman from the Universal Monster movies getting work.
Yeah, well, look, he was around, and
I did shoot a little cameo for Star Wars, actually.
Yeah, look, you get some day work also here and there.
You talk about the iconography of that. That is a straight up like good rendering of that bartender actor. That's what I'm talking about when like everything is iconic. They're like, oh, I know what that fucking bartender looks like. All right, so now we're back on the Death Star.
Yes, we cut back. We have we have a scene with Tarkin saying, look, we're going to set course for Alderaan, and it's time to demonstrate the full power of this battle station.
Yeah. And then we're out of there.
we
This
hard
thing-
cut
this
to
thing
3PO
cuts
and
around.
R2 hiding in a shuttle bay somewhere.
From the same wonky looking stormtrooper. What is this like extended? It's like it's too long. It's weird.
I don't know.
And then, boy, there is very very little Jawas. We don't really get a conclusion to Uncle and Aunt Beru, but boy, we get every semblance of Mos Eisley in this.
Well, and that was a big part of the special edition, is making Mos Eisley feel more exotic, I guess. At least we don't spend a whole page of him selling the land speeder, so that's something.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That is true. So yeah, they're wandering around. All right, let's get to Jabba, because this was one of the big special edition things, right? Which is interesting because they're working off of the shooting draft of the first movie, so that was included in the old adaptation, even though it wasn't in the movie proper.
And it was a scene they actually did film in the movie, which just, they didn't know what Jabba looked like at that point, so it was just a dude.
It's a guy in like a big fur coat is what I remember of seeing the on-set footage, right? Like he really is just sort of reading as like generic crime boss from anything.
Right, and in the 1977 comic, they made him into a weird, like, stalk-eyed alien creature with, like, a weird mustache thing going on. And in here, we get the whole sequence played out, which, again, in a good adaptation, or, you know, the original cut of the movie, would lose the scene entirely, because didn't Han just kill a guy that Jabba sent?
I know, it's always one of those things where it's like, I get that people like Jabba. I love Jabba, but in his proper place. And I also actually like the structure of just talking about Jabba and then revealing him in the third movie. I think is better structuring if it's like, Jabba, this guy's trouble. And then you see him, you're like, oh, he's a giant slug. But this scene is not a particularly great scene. It's redundant. And that bit when he steps on Jabba's tail is a fucking nightmare.
Because, again, for those who don't know and weren't around for this, there's a scene in this bit where Han walks around the back of Jabba. And again, as they shot it, he was just a guy, so he could just walk around behind him. But they had to make up this weird visual gag because, again, Lucas loves those, of him stepping on the tail of Jabba the Hutt. And they do this weird shift digitally to make Harrison Ford a little bit taller for half a second. It looks really awkward. And it also really detracts from how much you need to worry about Jabba the Hutt if Han Solo can literally step on him and get away with it.
Like, it's one thing for Han to be kind of shitty and, like, false confidence. Hey, Jabba, you listen to me. It's another thing for him to be that disrespectful, because it is like, well, I guess Han's not afraid of this guy at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And also,
as opposed to the beginning of Empire, when he's like, well, I've got to leave the rebels even though I love Princess Leia because I've got a death warrant on my head.
Yeah, it's like this guy is the most dangerous crime boss. It really does damage to Jabba. And also Boba Fett for no reason, of course, too.
Which, again, they added in the special edition just to retroactively have Boba Fett in this scene.
And look, man, I love the Fett man, but who needs him here?
Yeah, I don't know. And yeah, so we cut to them loading up on the Millennium Falcon. We've got the long-nosed snoot spy pointing towards them, saying they went that way.
Yeah. Blast them. This is kind of weirdly rendered in terms of like an exciting action scene. This like Han from behind shooting at them is kind of a weird, not exciting way to draw this.
Yeah.
And then also the shootout, that's it. That one panel is the shootout, and all of a sudden Han's just in the cockpit.
Yep.
And
Don't
we're
worry
out
about
of
how
here.
he got there. They blast off, they get out, they make the jump to light speed, and they have a brief interaction with the Star Destroyers. But, we get the brief thing about dusting crops, boy. I mean, at least they included that line, I guess.
It's good because at least that's on character. Like that's a further thing that adds character to Han Solo. But we're just going to jump to Lightspeed, and I will say they have chosen a not particularly exciting place to end part one of this comic.
Yeah, part one
here we go.
Ends with them jumping to Lightspeed. We get so much time spent in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon in this book when we could have, like, I don't know, had context for any other scene that happened before this.
Yeah.
But
nope.
No.
We're out of here, man.
Yeah, we needed Luke saying, "What's that flashing light?"
Yeah, that was super important.
We don't get any sound effects for the sounds Chewie makes, which I found very strange. Obviously,
Nope.
we
Chewie
made
is
fun of
kind
them
of
quite a bit.
non-existent here. But just in general, Chewie's such a non-entity in this issue.
I want to go back a little ways to the first
He's
interaction
just kind of
with
around.
Han. Do they actually even say Chewie's name at all?
I don't think they do.
Captain of the Millennium Falcon. Chewie's just there. They never actually introduced Chewbacca. Wow.
Yeah. Because the attitude is just, you know who that is.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Because, yeah, in the movie, it is definitely Obi-Wan who introduces Chewbacca the first time. This is Chewbacca. He is the first mate of a shuttle that might suit our purposes. But yeah, that's the end of issue number 1 of the Star Wars A New Hope Special Edition.
So special.
Obviously, we gave the 1977 version a hard time for taking way too long to get anywhere. If you remember, the first issue of that ended on the Tusken Raiders jumping Luke. And that's a good dramatic cutoff point. But also, by the end of that six-issue
our
series,
hero
we
has
were
been
definitely
knocked
feeling like,
unconscious.
ugh, this is going on for too long.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Whereas this now it has the opposite problem.
Yeah.
Will we ever be happy with a New Hope adaptation, Gergani?
We'll get to the manga version eventually, and we'll see how we feel about that.
I am really looking forward to that because once again, in the manga structure, it's going to be less choppy because you have more time.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is the first issue. We're going to be covering all 4 issues of this. I think we're going to have a lot of the same issues with every we're going to have the same issues with every issue.
Yep.
As is our wont.
Yeah. That's our job, damn it, though.
But that's our job, damn it. I am very interested to continue talking about this simply because it does represent such a strange pivot point in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the show is detailing these moments in Star Wars fandom where things are on the verge of or already changing. Because Star Wars fandom is such this monument of pop culture, you have these turning points, whether it be at the very beginning when no one had any context for what this was going to become, to this strange high watermark of, well, we don't have any new movies, but we're still so inundated with Star Wars as this piece of media that it has become its own multimedia franchise without multimedias.
Right. Well, we'll have to continue this adventure next. I have some idea of what we'll be talking about.
I have a feeling we might get to a blowing up planet, or we might see a certain tractor beam being shut down.
Could be. But we'll wrap things up for this week.
Absolutely. And if you want to support everything we do over here on May the Panel Be With You, please check us out over on YouTube if you're listening to us, or if you want to listen to the podcast on just audio only, you can do that too. Leave reviews wherever you can for the podcast. If you want to comment below, let us know if there are any other adaptations of A New Hope that we don't know about. If so, let us know. We can track them down. We've got the special edition, we've got the manga edition, we've got the original New Hope. Maybe there's the Infinities one that I can't wait to get to. But
I'm excited to get to those. Those Infinities comics are very fun.
They are very fun indeed.
But yes, of course,
like, comment, subscribe, dingle the bingle, all the things on YouTube.
All that, and of course, if you want to support the show even further, we do have a Patreon page, which there'll be a link to at the end, and that is patreon.podbean.com/punchup, where you can support this show, as well as the other great shows we do on the Punch Up Entertainment Network. And there is cool exclusive bonus content coming from May the Panel Be With You, so stay tuned for announcements about that.
Can't wait. But, as always, I have been Mike Gergoni.
I'm John Campbell.
And may the panel be with you.